how you can improve it as fast as humanly possible, which is such a real world challenge. But the other thing that it teaches you is the number one most important thing about mixing is striking great balances. That's it. Striking great balances. And sprint mixing is not about learning how to mix fast. It's about striking great balances. It's about because you do that all day, every day in the studio with everything. You audition a new sound for the production that you're working on. You're striking a balance between that new sound coming in and how well it works in your production. And the better instinctively that you are at setting that at a level that works well in your production is the difference between picking that sound and picking a different sound. And, because a snare drum 6 dB too loud when you audition it is going to give you a different feeling than a snare drum at the perfect level when you audition it. Same with, a piano and a string thing. And so, you get this idea that the idea of balances goes so far beyond mixing, but that's where the rest of it all comes together. And the sprint mixes just teaches you how to, fly by the seat of your pants, forget the tech, trust your gut, and just put it together and see what happens. It's like sports. It's fun. It's really fun.
That's amazing. I got to get into sprint mixing. Sounds like a great thing to do.
It is a lot of fun.
To improve your chops. I find just in general with mixing, the faster I get started with my rough mix, the better. Like, for me,
same.
Just like 2 hours and like that's 80% of the mix, something like that.
For me, that's 30 minutes to an hour. But the next 20 might take 2 to 8 hours,
Right.
And
got to strive for that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sprint mixing to me is the very condensed version of how I mix in real life, which is get everything into the mix really fast, because mixing is called mixing for a reason. And you're blending everything against everything else. And
nice.
Your kick drum that sounds one way now is going to sound a completely different way when 5 other instruments are on top of it. So get those 5 instruments into it now, along with all the vocals and everything else, and strike a general balance across everything. And then as you can see the picture coming together, you work to fine tune, and you can do that slowly over time, as long as you want. You can try ideas, you can A/B against reference material, all of that stuff. But until you start having a full picture of what you're actually mixing or produce, I do this when I produce too. I'm always in a state of very good rough mix, so that I always know the state that my production is in or my song is in or whatever. So yeah, it's super applicable to a whole lot of different things.
Yeah, so I'm assuming balance is like the first thing you're doing, and you're kind of keeping those balances pretty much the same as you're adding plugins or inserts or whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm kind of throw up a whole lot of faders really fast, and then maybe the 1 or 2 things that I know, okay, I hear this kick, I already know I'm going to do this. Here, done. Next, now I can move on. So, but I'm never ever the guy who is soloing the kick drum and tweaking it for 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 1 minute. It's just not.
Totally. It's not helpful.
It's I solo so that my ears can identify what I'm working on, and so that I can follow that sound around in the mix without having to solo it again or very frequently, and know what it's doing and how to work with it. But I rarely solo. The only time I work in solo is if I know exactly what I'm going for, and then I just check it unsoloed, and I'm seasoned enough to go like, oh, I know exactly what I'm going for. Here it is. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you about mixing. I know that you do some sort of hybrid setup. Can you tell me what's still missing in the box that you get out of some analog gear?
Almost nothing. The real difference is only the tactile experience. It almost completely comes down to the tactile, assuming that you either have great analog gear or great digital gear, and that, other things aren't fucking up your chain. It really comes down to workflow. And what workflow makes you feel the most creative, and what workflow gets you to a finish line in a way that feels like it flows and it's not laborious. And mixing with a mouse to me feels really laborious. I can do it, but it requires more brain power and more focus on what's happening on the screen and what's happening with all of the technology than I ever want to give a mix. I always like to keep my tech brain completely turned off. I like to stay in dummy mode and focus on what's coming out of the speakers or the headphones, and really just react in the purest way possible to what's, what I'm listening to, and then just ask myself, like, okay, well, what does the song need? And that question takes you so far, because when you ask yourself things like, what does the song need? You get different answers back. You don't get like, oh, the song needs 100 hertz on the kick drum. No, it doesn't, dummy. The song needs more drive in the low end. Is that bass guitar? Is that 100 hertz on the kick? Is it turning up the kick fader? Is it compressing the kick a little bit harder? Is it removing something that's getting in the way of the drive? You don't, it's a much more creative musical way to think about things and evaluate your choices. And it keeps you away from thinking like in terms of frequencies and ratios and stuff like that, which I try and keep my brain completely turned off from.
Wow.
That's just me. Some people can work in a really technical way. I just can't. And
that's really inspirational. I love that you're using your musicality to kind of like guide your mixing choices. I feel like at the end of a mix, it's hard for me not to be like, okay, I'll do some like EQ cleanup, because that's kind of like the last things I'm kind of hearing. Like, okay, the acoustic guitar is a little muddy and it's blocking some of the vocal. That kind of like end of the mix kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm loving let me just take a step back. It's not about the muddiness. It's about like, what does the song still need? What's it missing?
I find that a lot of engineers who are unseasoned or still learning hear something like you're saying, like, oh, that's muddy. I just did a master class in France, and I was covering this exact same thing. There was this like low frequency resonance in this vocal that I was EQing. And I knew that those guys wanted to clean up that low frequency resonance in the middle of it. And I was about to go do it, and I was listening to it, and I was like, "Oh no, that is really the character of the voice right there. If you get rid of that, it's a different person, and it's not the same vibe for the song." And when I showed them that, the difference, you start realizing that not everything is a problem that first presents itself as a problem, because you don't have to solve everything. And
you can't, there's no time to solve everything, right?
Yeah. And when you just make musical choices instead of tech choices, it's so funny, because I try and be really tech forward, but when I'm working, I try and be really tech ignorant.
That's great.
Yeah. And, but vibe is everything. And the thing with Greenhouse, the new plugin, is what I found about that is I've been using that time and time and time again. Whenever I hear a sound that's like, oh, this is a little bit vanilla. What do I want to do to this? How do I want to enhance it? Greenhouse is that thing, man. It's replaced so much of my arsenal. It's crazy. I don't know if you got to use it beforehand.
You sent it to me like maybe an hour before we had our call, and I was able to test it out for about 10 minutes.
Nice.
And it was super cool. Like based on a Fender Rhodes, just like really opened things up. That was like the main thing I was checking it out on.
Nice. So Greenhouse is my new plugin. It's Mixing Night Audio. We founded a plugin company to keep the show running for free. And we're in beta right now. We just entered beta. We'll be for sale sometime in late September. I think it's going to be $49. The thing, I mean, if Waves put it out, it'd be $200. It's a saturator into the Haas effect into a modulator with a ton of filters and a bunch of other special shit going on. And it is so much better than what I set out to make. I mean, that's the only way to really say it. It's so much better than what I thought we were going to do. And we just put together such a kick-ass team. And I've got a bunch of really great friends who like own and own plugin companies and work for plugin companies. And And the process has been slow, but we've been really lucky to sidestep a really bunch of big problems. And I feel like Greenhouse is going to be that thing, man.
It's also such a badass name. Like, it's such a cool name.
Yeah, it's Green Haas for anybody.
Right.
Anybody who knows the Haas effect, HAAS for nerd land out there.
Absolutely.
So the plugin is Green Haas, and it's basically the easiest way to summarize it is it's a stereo enhancing vibe box, and I use it to impart vibe and coolness into so many different things. I just did a remix with Skrizzly Adams for a single that we did called 28. So the 28 acoustic remix is just acoustic guitar and vocal. And we recorded it here and the whole nine. And I mixed it with Greenhouse on the lead vocal and on the acoustic guitar. And Skrizzly calls me up after I sent him the mix. And he had no idea what I had used and nothing. He's like, dude, the fuck did you use on my vocal? That shit sounds amazing. He's like, whatever that is, that's the new template. That's got to be my vocal sound from here on out. And I call him this is a message, and I'm like, bro, that's Greenhouse. He's like, you anytime you need my fucking endorsement on that, you got it, man. That's our thing now. And I'm like, that's the kind of responses that I've been getting from it. It's really like nuts. You just don't expect like one plugin to give you the call from the artist going, what did you do to my voice? So
that's it. That's sick. I gotta go listen to that.
Yeah.
Is it out yet?
Yeah, it's Skrizzly Adams 28 remix. It's the acoustic remix. It's just him and an acoustic guitar. But the main version of 28, for anybody who's not yet a Skrizzly Adams fan, go listen to the main version of 28 and you will know whether or not you're a Skrizzly Adams fan, because that song is epic as fuck. We did that during the pandemic, and that was like, I wouldn't say it wasn't a passion project, because I would have done the same work regardless. But, just being locked down in the pandemic really just gave me focus to turn that song into something kind of epic. So
amazing. Yeah, I'm excited to check that out. And I just noticed even like just the low pass filter, or sorry, the high pass filter was so good. It was so musical sounding, cutting out the lows, and still sounded so full and nice, That's the thing. Like, it's shockingly musical. And the other thing about it, so the interface is like, it's a very cartoon interface. Yeah, I love the GUI. I love it.
Yeah. We got so lucky with the GUI, and I don't put any of the parameters on anything, so you never know what any of the settings are under the hood. But virtually any setting that you go to sounds cool and musical. It's just like, well, do I like this one or that one or that one? Or, oh, this one's cool. Or, okay, now I have to decide. And it's kind of like one of those boxes. But I really want like to adopt my whole philosophy of like simplifying the, don't overthink this shit. It's music. It's not tech. And so,
it's not like the most subtle plugin. Like, it's you switch a parameter and it's like, oh, that sounds super different.
Yeah, it definitely can.
It's
be
almost
subtle,
like a stomp box, like
yeah.
Like if you're playing guitar, like, or bass or whatever. It's like, this is a new sound. I'm in. Yeah,
I was really surprised at the range of tonality we can get from that thing. And the range of usability. I mean, I've used it from everything to hi-hats to lead vocals to bass guitar to piano.
Wow.
To like, I don't really see anything that I don't think it would work on, if I had something that was just too vanilla. So, it's really kind of replaced a whole lot of other plugins for me that I reach for all the time, like different saturators and things like that, to try and impart vibe in other ways. And now it's just like, oh, well, I know this will do it. So
amazing. I'm curious a little bit about your stereo bus processing. How heavily do you lean into it?
Pretty.
Versus pretty
heavy. Yeah.
And how consistent is it?
Pretty. There's a whole lot of things that I know work for what I do. And I have a whole lot more skill sets on the mix bus than I use at any given time. So I can pretty much just listen to the song and know where I'm at. And I mix into the mix bus at a certain point. So basically, after all of my general levels are set and I know that the energy of my mix is not going to change,